Welcome back to Deal Flow Live. This is the show where we talk all things business transactions, running your business, growing it, and potentially selling or buying a business. And today we're talking about something that is a plague that faces many businesses that we care about and really love to talk about. We talk a lot about home services companies on this show, and today we're talking about the seasonality that they face. And this isn't just specific to home services companies, but we do see it a lot in home service companies. And today we're talking a little bit about how to navigate some of these things. How do you deal with the seasonality that comes in a business, whether it is in those categories or in something else? And we're going to talk a little bit about just things that we've seen work, things that have worked in businesses we've been part of. And hopefully, if that's something that you've dealt with in your business, if you've had struggles with seasonality, this is something that you could kind of walk away with some actionable tips for.
I think what they refer to it colloquially as is the shoulder season. I've heard, probably heard us have, speak on that, but also some of our guests have also mentioned that how these seasons are kind of the slow times or the times where you're just not hitting those numbers. And especially when you have a trade business or a personnel heavy business, that can be when you're trying to make sure you're paying everybody and people have work and they have jobs, because if they're not salaried, they're hourly. And if they're not getting on calls, you're risking them going to somebody else's business. So it's always, when we always talk about having some cash in the bank and having a few months of business expenses saved up, this is kind of what we mean. But I think when you might say, Ryan, but if these are hourly guys, are you just going to pay them if they're not on working, hours? Well, no. And I think that's where, Brody, you found that there's a lot of creative ways that you can kind of make sure that your guys still have work and are still getting out there and you're still making money.
The most obvious one, I think, for us to talk about is HVAC companies, like heating and air companies particularly. And I'm in an interesting space because the company that I am a partner of is an air duct cleaning company, and is actually built specifically around this niche that many heating and air companies don't want to do. And they don't really look at as much of an opportunity. They feel like it's more of a headache. Even if they get asked for it, a lot of them just don't want to do it because they find more profit in other areas. But it is something that is not really inherently seasonal. It's something that kind of has demand all year round. If you have air and you want to breathe cleaner, it's something that's always kind of like something that you can sell. So I think a lot of companies, like, they kind of just accept that there's this like seasonality to their business and they don't try to do anything about it. For heating and air companies specifically, the two biggest things I see is that they're not doing any kind of like monthly agreement. They're not getting anyone on any kind of like maintenance agreement or membership, and that they're not that they're neglecting some of these other services that they could be providing, and that they could be kind of focusing on during these seasonal times. So if you're a heating and air company and you're struggling in these kind of like, if you're kind of dealing with it regardless. Like, I think if you're up north, you're probably more busy during the winter, right? Because there's a lot of heating stuff going on. And there's probably a lot of times doesn't get hot enough to have as much stuff going on during the summer. But even if it does, you're probably more busy during the winter. And if you're in the South, like we are in Florida, then you're very busy during the months of like March or April to about maybe October, right? And then you see this huge gap, which is what we call the shoulders, where revenue is down, profits down, but you still have people you got to feed. You still have people that you hopefully want to keep around. Hopefully you have good technicians on staff. And what I've seen so many times with so many businesses we've talked to is that they lose those technicians during that off season, and they can never really keep someone longer than maybe a year or two. And you don't ever build a business that continues to grow every year if you're kind of on that constant cycle. And we just see so many get trapped in that constant cycle because they just can't really afford to float those people. Maybe they bring on like what we see a lot with these smaller businesses is they'll bring on like a couple kind of like temporary workers during the summer, during the big rush seasons. And you have that with a lot of different businesses where there's like busier times. And so we see them bring on particularly landscaping is another one, very common. There's grass and stuff is growing wild during the summer, and then it kind of slows down in the off season. And you just see that a lot of companies will just hire temporary workers, and they're not really building anything long term. So I think a lot of companies should try to focus on building in things with their client bases that have a little bit of like a recurring revenue base to them, something like that maintenance agreement, or better yet, a monthly membership of some kind where the customers are paying a certain amount to be on the membership, and that includes service of some kind. Then the other thing is, I just think not neglecting some of these great services that have less seasonality to them, maybe focusing on those things more during the off season.
Yeah, you're really trying to bake into this agreement that you've thought of everything that could possibly go wrong for the person you're servicing, and saying, look, just set it and forget it. It's the crockpot style of doing business, where you've covered all of these things, and outside of just a completely irrational, ridiculous situation, you're pretty much covered. So that's why when we talked about the value of having maintenance contracts, why it's so important to have them, it's also important to make sure that they're structured well. Because we also talked about how having, and we've seen a number of people in the space write about this, how just because you have a bunch of maintenance contracts doesn't actually mean that it makes you more valuable. In some cases, if they're not written well, they're not structured well, it actually makes your business less valuable because there's a whole lot more work. And that's why we're a big proponent of the cost being a year-to-year cost, and not a like 5-year guaranteed pay now, be good for 5 years cost, because you don't know what's going to happen. So why would you bake in cost of inflation that you don't know, which is another factor of that. So in the dog world, it's similar. I think for many people, when it comes down to the services of like the pet services industry, you're talking about daycare, boarding, training, grooming, all the in-betweens.
Yeah, what does the seasonality usually look like for those businesses?
It can be tough. So I know with my experiences, winter breaks for schools, pretty much that November-ish, December-ish through January, you're going to be seeing a drastic reduction for the most part, because a lot of people are home, kids are home, kids will watch the dog because they're home from school, and even older people who don't have kids, they're probably got family around, people who are in town, so they're less likely to be dropping off their animals. You will see, but that's why you also want the grooming, because the grooming spikes then, because people want to get their dogs all pretty for Christmas dinner for them to jump on the table and eat the turkey. And then you have the summertime. Everybody's home. People are staying in more. They're probably going to have their dogs with them at home, and it's going to be a lot less coming to the school. So what do? You try to offer, if you have classes, summertime classes that are family oriented. Like, you're really trying to push that message that people don't think about, where you're saying your kids are home, and odds are they're going to undo a lot of the training, which is unfortunately how it, why people are spending more in the winters, because their kid was home doing all the things the dog shouldn't do and encouraging them, and now they got to retrain it back because the dog's like, there are no rules. Turns out there's still rules. So they're kind of trying to get those complimentary service in, and that's why if you have a service that includes overnight boarding, that will save you. Because what are people doing in the summer and winter? They're vacationing. So you get those dogs overnight. They're having play by day, sleep at night. Essentially, instead of having them coming as a normal 9-to-5 client during the day, you've baked in that kind of, okay, they're actually paying for the boarding, which is kind of a little bit more with the services. So you're constantly having that cycle of, new and old pet parents, and trying to make sure that as family dynamics change and shift, you're keeping your school filled, you're keeping your people fed, and you're most importantly keeping all your services running, because they definitely don't need them at certain points. So that's why that multifaceted approach is almost a necessity if you're going into the industries like that.
So would you say that maybe the common trend here for most service-based businesses is that if you have seasonality of one particular service, there's a decent chance that you're really struggling with it, and that's killing your business, that there's a decent chance that you're ignoring some other service that could be more prevalent in those seasonal times?
Oh, certainly. I think that the prevalent customer knowledge that you have, and just understanding what are the needs of the customer, what are the wants of the customer, what are the the basics of almost marketing and business, like who's my customer, what do they struggle with, what do they need, and then how can I solve those problems. There's probably something that people need that either you're not asking, or you don't know about yet, or that they're telling your technicians or your staff, and they're just not saying anything because they don't even think about it. So understanding your customer base and the area that you live in specifically, and how you can offer year-round services, is really the difference, I think, between the players. And you've seen it, who are constantly cycling their staff, and then the ones who are actually keeping everybody on fed and continuing to scale and taking on those people who left those other businesses.
And what we've seen is when you are able to keep people on year after year after year, those people start to progress more and more every year. And when they do keep progressing, they tend to be able to take on leadership positions eventually, which allows their positions to be replaced and allows the companies to start to develop layers of management. So when you pair that increased profit to the bottom line, where you're getting more profit in what used to be your off seasons, with people starting to develop and become leaders, it's a very powerful thing for a business. Stacking that year after year, you could have one business not doing that and another doing it. They could be completely different businesses just in the space of a couple of years.
Certainly. And I think the thing that we hit on a lot, but I think can't be underscored enough, is that it's relationships. You keep on technicians. You got people who are like, oh, I definitely, they start to like a particular person to come to their house. That person's known, they tell their friends about it. And that you're basically, now you're getting free marketing, and, you have people, because people like to know who's stepping into their house. So the more they stay, the more they develop relationships. And then even as they grow, you're really kind of embedding yourself within the community and, getting free marketing, because you're spending $10K on marketing, only getting a few leads. But the guy, we see it all the time. I've never spent a dime on marketing, but I have more calls than I can handle. Long-term people work there. They've made a lot of relationships, and they're happy to have them come back, and everybody wants them to come to their house.
That's right. I think the other thing that we talked about, so we talked about the kind of finding the right services. I want to talk a little bit more about this kind of concept of retention and creating recurring revenue. I want to talk about, so we gave the example of having some kind of like maintenance agreement or membership option, monthly membership. I think there's something that any business can find in what they're already doing to increase this. And it's something that I think creates better longevity with customers too. Whenever I look at, we're rolling out something like this with one of my other businesses where we're kind of launching a new set of service lines. And when we went about trying to think of what would a recurring revenue model look like in this business, the first thing that we thought of was, okay, what services are we providing? How could we provide more value for less money if they go with the membership? And it was all about like packaging kind of this like premium option of like the customer that would be using our services the most, but would want to be able to use them at less cost per service. And so I think one of the first places you can look to in any business in some kind of membership is, what services are your customers using anyway? And how often are your customers using them that are using them the most often? Maybe you have, to use your example of the pet services, maybe you've got someone who's boarding their dog. Maybe they travel a lot and they're boarding their dog and they make a lot of money. And maybe they're boarding their dog 3 times a month. And all of a sudden that could be an opportunity to say, okay, well, maybe we have a boarding membership where you pay like a guaranteed amount monthly, then you get some kind of discount on the boarding. And so I try to look at opportunities for things like that, where there's maybe some kind of discount that comes with the membership on other services, or there's just extra value that you can add to that, maybe exclusive offers or exclusive things that you don't do for non-members that your customers are already asking for.
2 words: pajama party.
Pajama party. Yeah, elaborate.
Buddy. You got somebody who's boarding their dog for a week. We were the kings of, your dog's here for a while because you're out of town. We're just going to give you a freebie. So like somebody who boards for a long time, it's expensive. It's a lot of money. So like, what do? Oh, we're doing a pajama party that day and you're not here. Cool. We'll have your dog participate in the pajama party and send you pictures, give you a photo of your dog in the pajamas with the background, and what we did was we also would wrap in like, packages of everything. I think, whatever it was, we offered nail packages. So we'd say, hey, you're coming back. Do you want to use some of your grooming package, have your dog all fresh, whatever. And at a certain point, after enough, people who were there for, doing board and trains, which was a very expensive service, all the stuff was included, the events, the stuff. I mean, we just, you rolled it all into it. I mean, it was a premium service, but, people were very happy, and they were getting, you're cutting so much off the bottom line of like, what we were able to do. But
well, then especially if those are things, and it sounded like there was some things bundled in there that were other services you provide, that have a cost associated with them. I think when you start to bundle in things without charging more with something that's already a premium service, especially if you've built the premium service such that you have good profit margin on it and you have kind of some wiggle room to maybe add in a little bit of extra labor here, maybe a little bit of extra material or product here, without killing your margin or really without making too much an effect on it. I think you can start to really stack the value of what the customer perceives. And if they perceive, if it's an expensive service, but all of a sudden they perceive that they're adding so much value into it, this is ridiculous, then by comparison, they're just going to feel like they're getting a great deal.
I mean, you can do a service for an HVAC company. This is the most common one, I think. Full service twice a year. They come in, check it out, and then you offer a couple, cleanings as a freebie. Maybe those cleanings are, $50-$60 a piece, depending on the size, but you're saying I'll eat that because this is like a $500 package. So you're going to get 3 cleanings, could be even more.
The cleanings can be, well, I'm in the industry, I know. So the cleanings can be, depending on the home, we do mostly high-end residential, like high-end and luxury residential. But the cleanings can be anywhere from like 500 to like a few thousand, depending on the home. So, I mean, you could very easily bundle in a cleaning that takes a couple hours, three hours at the most, maybe, of your labor, which is going to be, let's say 2 guys at $23 an hour, right? 3 hours, it's going to be maybe $150 for you, something like that, of labor. You can bundle that into something that maybe it's I don't know, maybe it's like a monthly membership that ends up being like $100 a month even. If the customer's paying $1,200 and you throw in something that's $150 in labor, it's a pretty good deal for the business, right? You just start stacking a bunch of those. And sure, it comes with a little bit of an obligation of the labor, but your margin ends up really good. Mm-hmm. And you're also staying on top of things with the customer. And you've got someone out there visiting constantly, and maybe you start to be able to spot other issues that you wouldn't have otherwise seen. Maybe there's like a little tune-up that needs to happen, and maybe the membership includes like a 15% discount on services or something. And one of the technicians, while they're doing a cleaning, says, okay, well, looks like this is broken. Do you want to wait for this to break all the way and us to have to replace this, or would you rather us just give you a tune-up? And then all of a sudden, you've increased your margin even more.
And even more important than that, you have guys on the ground during the slow season working and
getting paid to work.
So, I mean, realistically, these are just ways that you keep people employed and keep them moving, and that you're also kind of making sure, that your customers are getting taken care of, and also in a certain degree, avoiding more problems before they happen when they see them.
That's exactly right. I think altogether, what I want someone watching this to leave with a call for is to look at your business very objectively and say, the longer you've been in business, the better, the more data you have on this. What are your customers asking you for? What are maybe some of the things that you do already that, especially maybe some of the things that services that you provide that you don't sell quite as often, but could be a good value to a customer? How could you maybe bundle those in and make a customer feel like they're getting an incredible deal on some of your larger things and make them more likely to take that and just kind of have a win-win in the situation? Mm-hmm. So I think I would like for this to be just a call to any business owner to take a look at their business and see if there's more longevity that they can add to it to get rid of some of that seasonality. Because if you just increase the value of all of your customers, get them paying more per customer, you're not going to feel that seasonality quite as hard.
No, we always preach to keep like 3 to 4 months of expenses tucked away in your business account just in case. But, you don't want to have to be tapping into that. Ideally, that should be used for some emergency pop-up repairs, but this is the way it's not healthy to be like, well, I'm going to use this every single year. You want to avoid using it at all costs.
That defeats the whole purpose. That's exactly right. Well, if you found any insightful tips out of this podcast, watching it, go to scaleforsale.com. We do this kind of work in businesses. We can come into your business, kind of look under the hood and see where you might be able to adjust things to maybe avoid some of that seasonality, maybe set yourself up a little bit better. But Also, we do this podcast every Tuesday night at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So tune in from time to time just to get some little valuable tips that you might be able to use in your business. And maybe also figure out how to sell your business for more money, or even what to do if you buy a business and how to buy one. In the meantime, we'll see you on the next episode. Take care.